Hi everybody, my name is Lillian Ruiz and I am the instructor for English 116, Literature and Film. So what I wanted to do today in this video is to basically introduce you to the class. And what I try to do in these online videos is duplicate as much as possible what I would be doing in a face-to-face class. So what I would be doing in a face-to-face class today is just reviewing the course syllabus and the course outline, just so that you could have a holistic view of what the class is about, and then we could begin in earnest after that. So that's what I'll be doing today. And I'm assuming that you have access to Moodle and you know how to get onto Moodle, or else you wouldn't be watching this particular video. And on Moodle, you can see that we've got a top section that's entitled General. And this is where I have placed several icons, several folders of important pieces of information for the course as a whole. And the first one in blue is entitled Syllabus and Other Documents. This is where I have uploaded our class syllabus, I've uploaded our course outline, and where I will be uploading any handouts that I would normally be giving in a face-to-face class. Now, the next icon underneath that, also in blue, is past class sessions. So what you will be able to access on the front Moodle page is the current week. And when that week is over, I will retire that week, put it into past class sessions so that you can access it throughout the entire semester, but basically you'll have the current week visible. Discussion forum, and that's in the orange icon. And this is where I try to duplicate what we would do during a class discussion in a face-to-face class. So I will be posting a discussion forum question each time I post a video and ask you to respond to that question. Your response I count as attendance, much like as if you were participating in class. And I like to ask questions that don't necessarily have right or wrong answers, that really more are opinion based or that show your reasoning abilities. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Optional chat, and you can see that that is indented a little bit to the right, is not necessary for this class. It's optional, but if you ever wanted to chat with me or your fellow classmates, you could do so through that icon. Same with optional Zoom, and you'll have my Zoom information there, and that's the last icon in blue. And you can see that underneath that, I've got our current week, our first week. So there are no retired weeks at this point because we've just begun. And week 127, Monday, which is where we are today if you're watching this on the 27th, and 129, Wednesday. So basically what I'm going to be doing is posting videos when we would normally meet in a face-to-face class, and in a face-to-face class we would normally meet on Mondays and Wednesdays, but more on that in a moment. And you can see that our topic is just introduction, and that my intention is just to review the syllabus and course outline, which you can find in the syllabus and course outline folder. And note that I don't necessarily use all of the elements of Moodle. So I'm not using the Moodle grading program. And more on that in a few moments when we start talking about assignments and so forth. And you'll see that the attendance question will be posted and is posted under that. And I'll do that for every class. And our attendance question, not too surprising, is for you to briefly introduce yourself to the class. Feel free to upload pictures and videos, but not required. And you're going to get 48 hours from the time that I post that question to respond to that, which I'll talk about more in a few moments. So what I wanted to do was to go to the syllabus, which is one of the documents, again, in the general section and the syllabus and other course documents folder, and talk about our syllabus and then move and talk about our course outline. So what I recommend is that you make paper copies of these because I think it makes it easier and more accessible. I've got a paper copy right in front of me as I go through the syllabus. And as you can see, as the top of the syllabus progresses, basically what you've got are some general pieces of contact information. My name, Lillian Ruiz. Most people call me Lillian. I'm pretty informal, but feel free to call me whatever you feel comfortable with. My phone number, that'll get you to my office, 775-1236. My email, which happens to be my surname, Ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu. And if you're a student, you might have noticed that there is no first initial in my email address, the way there usually is in most email addresses at GCC. The reason why, when I started at GCC, we didn't yet have email. It's hard to believe. It was in 1993. That's how long ago it was. And when we finally did get email, we really weren't forward enough thinking to think that the number of duplications we would have with just a surname would be overwhelming. Once we figured that out, then we realized that a first initial should also be added. So if you ever see a GCC email address with just a surname, they've probably been at GCC for quite a while. My office, North 328A, and that's in the ID Center, the Inclusion and Diversity Center. So if you are interested in topics of inclusion and diversity, and everybody is welcome, this is a great place to visit. I encourage all of you to visit. There's a little study section there. There is a kitchenette there. There also is a common room there where there's some soft seating and board games. And my office is housed there as well if you ever wanted to talk about the topics of inclusion or diversity. My office hours, and I don't know how useful this will be to you as an online student, but I should be in my office in person on Mondays and Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10:30, Tuesdays and Thursdays 10:30 through 11:30, or by appointment. So if those times don't work for you, you can always make an appointment. So if I'm not in a meeting, I should be physically present there if you ever wanted to physically meet with me. Now, textbooks, and I know that textbooks can get pretty tricky. So I have a textbook entitled The Bedford Introduction to Literature, which is actually a really great book because it gives you lots of different samples of literature, and it talks about how to read literature, how to write literature, or how to write about literature, how to analyze literature. So I'm very fond of it. I believe the 11th edition is the edition that the GCC bookstore has, but I know there have been some issues with the books in the bookstore. The page numbers that I'm going to be providing you with are from the 11th edition, but the good news is you can use any edition, whether it's before the 11th or after the 11th. You might need to look up the text that we are reading. And the good news is that the pieces of literature that we're going to be reading are available usually online for free. So whenever I find the link, I will be providing that for you. So what I've done is that I've made the other readings in the textbook that are not available for free online, recommended readings. And I really do recommend that you do those readings because it'll make the class so much easier for you. Those are the things that I will be talking about in usually the early part of each of the units that we are going to be discussing. And there is a hard text copy of the text in the GCC library on reserve if you wanted to access the book there as well. And I ordered a separate text just because it wasn't included in the 11th edition, but you can find it in lots of places. Thus far, I've been able to find it online for free, which I will provide for you. A Raisin in the Sun, which you might have heard of. It's a very famous play that we will be reading over the course of the semester. But in addition to reading literature, we're also going to be talking about film because this is a film and literature class. And we will also be watching film. And again, the same sort of situation that thus far I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to find free web links of the films that we will be watching, which I will be providing for you. I don't ask questions about copyright. I just merely provide information. If it turns out that those films are not available for free, then you're going to have the responsibility of finding that film, whether it's through a streaming service or going to the GCC library where you can access a copy there. But thus far, I've been very fortunate and that I've been able to find everything online for free. So again, you don't know how things will change day to day when it comes to websites, which is why I usually provide the the appropriate website right before we're talking about that particular topic, so I can at least verify that at that point in time that website is active and functional. And then I've also got it's assumed that you'll have a good dictionary at the source for reference, which I know are loaded into your computers, but it's different having access to something and actually using it. And since this class is also about writing, one of the best things to use when you're a writer is a thesaurus, so you can find synonyms, words with similar meanings, so you don't have repetition in your paper. Sometimes a thesaurus will also provide you with antonyms, opposites, and a dictionary. And in addition to the spell check, and the dictionary can provide you with definitions, parts of speech, pronunciation. So it's very nice to have access and to utilize both regularly. So the course description, so I'm moving down the syllabus now, and this is from the course catalog, just to remind you what you signed up for, that this class builds and extends on the academic writing process and skills introduced in English Composition 1. Students develop close reading abilities for a variety of literary, sometimes non-literary texts, and hone critical research skills, as well as research and documentation. As well as research and documentation skills using a variety of genres that can include things like essays and fiction and poetry and drama and film. Writing assignments emphasize the formal, researched, and documented essay and include creative experiments and literary analysis. The course includes selections from a wide variety of authors, genres, and texts that engage students in written and visual analysis and research. Now, we offer 3 versions of this class: 112, 114, and 116. This class 116 has a film component, so we're going to be talking about analyzing cinema from an academic perspective. English 112 is focused just on literature itself. English 114 is focused on the creation of literature. But you're in English 116. And the prerequisite is what we call English 101 at GCC, or an introductory level composition class. So you already have some familiarity with writing an academic paper. The idea is that now you can apply those skills to different pieces of literature. So if you think you haven't satisfied those requirements, please let me know. English 116 offers a general introduction to the content and techniques of literature and film. We will study representative films, short stories, dramas, and poems. This course emphasizes critical thinking, critical reading, and critical writing. A lot of critical in there, not necessarily as in criticism, but in asking questions, analyzing, interpreting, or what I've oftentimes said toddlers do very well, they ask questions, especially why. And I've said that's really the biggest distinction between high school and college. High school is about learning what. College is about trying to determine why. And as a class, we will strive to appreciate the aesthetic and literary merits of film and literature. So the learning outcomes, as a result of successfully completing this course, you should be able to, 1, develop an appreciation for and understanding of film and literature. 2, see reading, writing, and observing as an ever-evolving process. This is a skill that you develop over the course of a lifetime. 3, you use the rules of formal academic writing, but you also learn to have your own sense of voice. You shouldn't sound like me. You should not sound like the textbook. You should sound like yourself. So I kind of liken it to driving, that there are rules we all have to follow, but we all have variance in the ways that we drive, and I think it's very similar with writing. To improve oral and written communication skills, I have that on all of my syllabi, and yes, I am an English teacher, but I also teach classes in communications, I teach classes in public speaking, so it's pretty eclectic, and yes, I'm the one who teaches the class in horror film, so if you are specifically interested in the horror genre in film, I teach a class in that. In fact, I'm teaching that this semester. I believe it's Thursday evening, if I'm correct, but I can tell you more about that if you're interested. And to effectively utilize word processing, email, search engines, the internet, all of it, in the study of film and literature. We all have access to these things and we all use these things, and we oftentimes waste a lot of time using these things. So what are efficient and effective ways of utilizing these electronic resources? So procedures. So how would I do this in an online class? And as I said, I try to duplicate as much as possible of what I would do in a face-to-face class. So I'll post a video of myself discussing the class material, much like this. And I will post that video at the time in which our class would normally meet. So if we were meeting in person, it would be Monday and Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. So you can expect that every Monday and Wednesday by 10:30 a.m. you'll have a video posted. And in fact, to be quite honest with you, I'm going to try to post the night beforehand, but certainly by Monday and Wednesday at 10:30, you should have a video. And you have 48 hours to watch that particular video and to answer its corresponding attendance question on class discussion form. So at the ending of each class, I will have a question for you to respond to that will be in the discussion form. And your response to it counts as your attendance for the class, which I will talk about a little bit more in depth when we talk about the discussion form. Your answer in the discussion form satisfies your requirement. Any additional interaction you have with your classmates in the discussion forum, I think of as participation. So you're not required to respond to your classmates, but you're certainly encouraged. So if you do respond to others' forum responses or posts, you're doing what you would do in a face-to-face class when you raise your hand. It's basically participating. And I know that some students learn better by being very vocal and participating, and some students learn better by basically being more quiet and reflective. So both are valid ways to learn. What you are required to do, however, is to read all of your classmates' responses and my responses in turn, because I will be responding to all of you. And that basically will give you a sense of what we would have discussed in class if we were in a face-to-face class. And then you are going to submit any of your written assignments over the course of the semester, things like papers or a final exam, which I'll talk about in a moment, to my email, which again is Ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu, because that's how my grading program works best, via PDF. And please use your GCC email address when you're sending me information so that your assignment doesn't end up in a spam folder. So course requirements. Pretty straightforward that you're expected to complete all reading and writing assignments by the due date. There will be 2 out-of-class papers assigned, one approximately midway through the semester, which would give us some time to talk about the class, and one towards the ending of the semester, and I'll talk about some more shortly. And you'll also do your discussion forum questions. So you'll have 2 of them each week. And there also is a final examination. So there is an institutional services disability statement that I wanted to read to you that you might be familiar with if you are a returning student to GCC, that Greenfield Community College values inclusion and equal access to its programs and activities. It's committed to fostering an environment of respect and full participation. The goal is to create learning environments that are equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. So if there are aspects of the instruction or design of this course that result in barriers to your inclusion or accurate assessment or achievement, please notify me as soon as possible. And if you have some sort of a disability and you need some sort of reasonable academic accommodation, please contact the Office of Disability Services as soon as possible to discuss your options, and the contact information is there. So a little bit more on that attendance and discussion form. That class activity and discussion is important. You really can't make it up. So absences and tardiness will be negatively reflected in your participation grade, which I evaluate through your response to the discussion form. And while each case is different, anything more than 2 absences could lower your grade. Excessive absences could even result in failure. So if you need additional time from the 48-hour deadline that I'm going to be giving you to respond to a discussion forum question, please ask for an extension. I'll be happy to grant it to you. You don't need to notify me if you're going to be missing 1 or 2 classes, but do speak with me if you're missing several classes at that point. So you have the option basically of having 2 absences in the discussion forum over the course of the semester. Consultations. You can meet with me during office hours. You can meet with me by appointment. And the information on papers here is mostly formatting. That papers are due on the day specified, again via PDF to my email address. All papers should be typed and double spaced and have 1-inch borders. I hope that sounds familiar from your previous English class. Pages should be numbered, and cover pages should include things like, and there is a cover page that I'm going to ask you for, which is just a separate sheet of paper, or in this instance, a separate screen that would list the paper title, your name, course and section number, my name, and the due date. Late work. Late papers will lower your grade by 1 full grade. No late paper will be accepted after 1 week has elapsed unless you've made other arrangements with me beforehand. And be sure to keep a copy of any paper or anything else that's important really for yourself. So I will distribute paper assignments through the term, and I will offer you options, but you are also going to be encouraged to create your own paper assignment. You just need to get it approved by me. What I'm going to be doing for the papers is asking for a critical paper, which means it's not a research paper. This is based on your own interpretations. And your paper length would be approximately 4 to 5 pages, but your paper should be as long as it needs to be for you to be able to construct a good argument. And for that first paper, which would be due by the ending of by the middle of the semester, though I'm very hopeful that you submit it before then, that is a paper that you have the option to revise for a higher grade, because I think of the first paper as a learning exercise. So when you submit it into me via email, and then I'll return it to you with my commentary, then you can decide if you're satisfied with your grade. If you're satisfied, you're done. If not, well, then what you can end up doing is a revision where you incorporate my feedback and comments, and then you get the higher of the 2 grades, which should be the revision. And I see that as a learning exercise. But there are 2 papers in the semester, and the second paper would be due by the ending of the semester. Very similar kind of paper, 4 to 5 pages, and it would be a critical paper based on your own observations. And since it's due at the ending of the semester, you wouldn't have time to revise it, but the idea is that you would have learned how to write a paper with your first paper, so you wouldn't need to do that with the second paper. So if you do decide to do a revision, I just ask that you consult with me and that you submit in the original evaluated paper with my comments along with the revision. And late papers can't be revised. Again, another reason to ask for an extension, because once you ask for an extension, it's not late. I'm going to skip the next section, which is about plagiarism. I'll talk about that next class. And go to the grading section. These are approximate percentages. 25% is participation, so that's a good amount for these discussion forum responses, which you would be doing twice weekly. I count that as the attendance, the class assignment, and activities and so forth that you would be doing in a face-to-face class. Paper number 1, which by that point we would have had a good amount of time to talk about literature, film, and how to go about writing about both. That is 25% of your grade and would be due approximately midway through the semester, but I have what I call rolling deadlines, where I encourage students to hand in papers early, which I'll talk about in a few moments. And of course, you have the option of revising that first paper. Paper 2, and that's going to be on different texts or films of the semester, but same length pretty much and same approach pretty much, and that would be due by the ending of the semester, so you probably wouldn't have time to revise it, but you would have already learned how to write a paper with the first paper. And a final examination, which, if we were in a face-to-face class, you'd have approximately 2 hours to take. So what I'm going to do is to give you 24 hours for the final, but I would expect that you would devote about 2 hours to that final exam. And it is going to be an essay exam, and it will be cumulative, but the focus will be on the last unit that we will be studying in the class, because we would not have had a chance to write a paper on the last unit that we are studying in class. So again, open book, open notes, essay exam, and with choice within it for the final for 25%. For an A, excellent, a B, good, a C, satisfactory. Yes, I'm aware there are other letters that follow, but I don't want to concentrate on those letters, especially on the first day of class. So the criteria for essay evaluation, which is underneath that, talks a little bit about what an A paper looks like, or a B paper, or a C paper. What's the difference between an excellent or a good or satisfactory, and so forth and so on, which we can talk about as the semester progresses. So what I wanted to do was to transition over to our course outline, which is another document in our syllabus and other documents folder that I encourage you to print up. And you can see that I've got a couple notes at the top where it says dates and assignments might be subject to change. So I've planned out the entire syllabus and semester, but certainly if there is something like inclement weather or something unexpected, we might not necessarily be following these dates. But we will do all of these pieces by the ending of the semester. And even though dates and assignments may be subject to change, these assigned readings should be completed before the dates indicated on the syllabus, because these are the dates in which I plan on talking about these particular readings. So you can see that we've got an introduction for week 1, which is today, on Monday the 27th, if you're watching this now, where basically I just review the syllabus, course outline, and ask you to introduce yourself. So for next class, now these readings are recommended readings from the textbook. If you're using a different edition, they might be on different pages. These recommended readings are about what is literature. Reading imaginative literature is what they call it. Critical strategies for reading. What are some of the ways that you can analyze literature from an academic perspective? Reading fiction. How do you go about reading literature? And watching and analyzing films. That actually happens to be a handout that I will be providing to you next class. And I will be posting that electronically in our syllabus and other documents folder. So note that you don't have a required reading, just a recommended reading next class. And that is also the same for the following class, following Monday on the 3rd of February. And I've done that deliberately. And the reason why is because I see the first week and a half or so as introduction. So what's recommended are the readings writing about fiction. Again, these are the page numbers for the 11th edition, but you might have different page numbers. Writing about film, which is a handout that I will be providing to you. The writing process, how do you go about writing a paper, which hopefully will be reviewed from English 101. And to have you skim, and by skim I mean skim, the glossary, that there is a glossary at the ending of the textbook that gives you some literary terms, many of which we will be learning and discussing this semester. And then we begin with watching our first film. And if all goes well, I'll be able to find the online link for Citizen Kane so that you can watch it for free. But if not, there will certainly be a copy of it in the library. And Citizen Kane is a very important film in terms of film studies. So we'll talk about why we are studying this film, even though it is rather dated, 1941. It's an hour and 59 minutes long. One of the things we'll talk about film, which is very similar with literature, you need to read literature multiple times, you need to watch film multiple times. So some of you might have already seen Citizen Kane. That's wonderful because you want to see it as many times as possible. Each time you see it, you get nuance that you didn't get the previous time. But at the very least, you want to be able to watch it and know why it's so important. If you're going to write about it, I usually suggest 3 film viewings. The first, to experience it, the second, to analyze, and the third, to remind yourself of what it was that you saw. But more on that later. And you can see that we've got multiple classes devoted to Citizen Kane because I wanted to talk about that film, show that film, have some film critics talk about that film. So what that does is puts us to President's Day. By that point, we would have been able to talk about hopefully writing papers as well. We're not meeting on President's Day, which is during week 4. That's the 17th of February. And then we go back to reading from the textbook. And these are required readings that you should have read before the 19th of February because they're scheduled for the 19th of February, where we are comparing 2 short stories from A Secret Sorrow and A Sorrowful Woman. I provided you with page numbers, but I should be able to provide you with web links for free when we get to that point. And then you'll see that we'll begin reading some short stories. Some you may be familiar with, perhaps. One entitled The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. That's scheduled for the 24th of February, so hopefully you would have read it by the 24th. Rose for Emily, and that also is scheduled for the 24th, so hopefully you would have read it before the 24th. And an author's interview on A Rose for Emily. And again, I will provide you with web links, free web links, whenever I can. Thus far, I've been successful doing that. But you can see the page numbers. The good news is that you can usually find these texts in lots of places. And then on the 26th, what we'll be talking about, so you should have already had it read by that point, a short story called Young Goodman Brown, a short story called Soldier's Home. And then when we go to week 6, we finish up this unit, which is on fiction, which is film, and what we're doing is short story, where we read a short story called Invisible Man, Battle Royal, which is from a novel, actually, Invisible Man. And our last short story is Popular Mechanics. And then on the 5th of March, we go to recommended readings again because we transition out of this unit of fiction and film and we move to drama and film. And I have some recommended readings for you about how to read drama. And yes, I know drama is ultimately meant to be performed, and we'll talk about the distinction between the two. The elements you can expect in drama, and also drama in popular forms as opposed to the kind of academic drama that we might be devoting our time to in an academic setting. And then we will be presented with our first drama. And our first drama is going to be a very old drama, Oedipus the King. It is from 430 BC Greece. So we are obviously not reading it in the original Greek. We are reading a translation. We'll talk about some of the challenges of reading translations. I've always said I've never really read Oedipus the King. I've read many English translations, but I don't speak Greek, so I've never read the original. But why it's so important to read this play and to watch a performance of this play when it comes to understanding drama. So we will be also watching a film about Oedipus the King that tries to duplicate what we might have experienced in 430 BC in a Greek amphitheater. And we've got multiple classes devoted to Oedipus the King because dramas are longer and we also have to watch performance. So the idea here is that ideally, I know life isn't always ideal, but ideally when we get to about the 10th of March, when we start talking about Oedipus the King, you would have already read that play in its entirety so that you can be preparing for the next play that we'll be doing. Note that we have a spring break in here in week 8 on the 17th and the 19th, Monday and Wednesday, spring break. And then we move to week 9. And this is where we move into Shakespeare. And this is our second play of the drama unit. And that is A Midsummer Night's Dream, a play you might have some experience with. And again, you have some recommended readings about how to read Shakespeare, which I will be talking about as well. And then we'll be watching a performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream in film. And then also we will be reading and talking about A Midsummer Night's Dream. We've got multiple classes devoted to that. So the idea is that you are reading the next play while we are discussing A Midsummer Night's Dream. And our next play and our very last play, probably the easiest play because A Midsummer Night's Dream is from England, the late 1500s. Our last play is from America, 1959, so I think it's going to be much more accessible. It's called A Raisin in the Sun. It is a great play. And it's not included in the edition of the textbook that I had ordered, but I ordered a separate edition. And again, if all goes well, I should be able to provide you with a free web link. And we will be watching a film on A Raisin in the Sun and talking about that particular play, the film version, as well as the text version over several classes. And then ultimately, we get to move to our very last unit. And our very last unit after drama, note we would have started first with fiction and film, then we would have moved to drama and film, and our last unit is poetry and film. And there'll be some recommended readings about how to read poetry, what is poetry. And then we will read some representative poems. Now, I sometimes tend to fall behind in class, so on the 16th of April, which is a Wednesday, I have a catch-up class scheduled for us. So if we do start to run behind, we've always got that emergency class there, which is right before Patriots Day, which is on the 21st. And when we return from April 21st, Patriots Day, the film that we will watch that will be about poetry is Dead Poets Society, which you may already be familiar with. Came out in 1989 with Robin Williams. It talks about lots of things, including poetry. And we've got a couple of classes devoted to watching and talking about that film. And then we can move to representative poems. And we start with talking about poems on the 30th of April. And we're starting with a Shakespearean poem. We'll talk a little bit about how Shakespeare was a poet as well as a dramatist. And the poem is Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, which you might be very familiar with because it's probably Shakespeare's most famous sonnet, is the name of that kind of poem. And The Sick Rose by William Blake, which I have listed as a handout, which means it's not included in the 11th edition, but I'll be providing you with a website. And then several of the other poems we'll be reading. And again, ideally, you would have read the poems before the class listed because that's what I'm talking about during that class. Some Emily Dickinson, especially important in this area because Emily Dickinson is the darling of Amherst. Because I Could Not Stop for Death is the poem that we will be reading. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, another New Englander, very famous poet. And then we'll be moving to some more contemporary poetry. America by Allen Ginsberg. He's known as a beat poet, and they were a very different and unique style of writing. And also a poem entitled Coca-Cola and Coco Frio, which is by Martina Spada, who happens to be actually not only an up-and-coming poet, but a professor at UMass Amherst. And he oftentimes speaks locally, so you might have had the opportunity to hear him speak. And then we end with our last poem, which was done in 2021 in the presidential inauguration by Amanda Gorman, The Hill We Climb. And then this is the date that your second paper would be due. And obviously, I'm asking for early papers. And note that your second paper is going to be about drama and film. So by this point, we would have already finished our drama section. And it's the same thing with the first paper, that your first paper, which is going to be due around, or by, I should say, March 12th, paper number 1 is going to be either about short story or film, but early papers are encouraged. So at any point after I give you the paper topics, you can submit in a paper. But by the 12th of March, that puts us into week 7, about halfway through the semester, and I'm getting a little bit anxious that you haven't submitted in your first paper. So that ideally would be the last day that you would hand in that paper, though of course you can always ask me for an extension. But as I said, I have what I call rolling deadlines. So once we start talking about the papers, you can hand in the paper at any point. That paper will be devoted to our first unit, paper 1, on short story or film, because by that point we would have finished reading short story and film. And your paper on drama, though of course you can hand it in early, would be due by the ending of the semester, because by that point we would have finished talking about drama. Notice that we are going up until the ending of the semester talking about poetry, so we really won't have a lot of time to be able to devote a paper to poetry. So instead, the final exam, the bulk of it, 80 points, will be devoted to poetry. Again, essay questions about the poems, open book, open notes, and that also includes film. For us, that would be Dead Poets Society. However, I'll have 2 shorter questions with shorter essays for short story or film and drama or film. And that basically is our semester as a whole. I know I've given you a lot of information. I don't expect you to remember everything, which is why you can always go back to the syllabus, the course outline, or rewatch this video. And I certainly hope that I've answered your questions, but if it turns out that if I haven't, please reach out to me. You can see we're at about the 40-minute mark, so my videos are usually somewhere in the area of about a half hour to 40 minutes to give you an idea. So what's left at this point is our attendance question. As I had indicated, I'm going to ask you to briefly introduce yourself to the class. This is in the discussion forum, and you can see that post in the notes below. Below every video, I've got the notes for class, the notes that I would normally post on a whiteboard. So I'm just going to ask you to briefly introduce yourself to the class. Feel free to upload audio, visual, but not required. And I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. And your next class, so to speak, your next video will be posted by 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Take care. Bye-bye.